He stood among the teachers like he belonged there, clipboard in hand, calling us by name. But later, when we asked the school who he was, they swore no such chaperone had ever signed up. This happened during my junior year on a class field trip to a large art museum in the city. I wasn't particularly into paintings or sculptures, but it meant a day away from school, so I wasn't about to complain. There were 4 teachers, a couple of parent volunteers, and about 30 of us students in total. When we arrived, the teachers did a quick head count, grouping us in lines before sending us off with the guides. That's when I noticed him, a tall man, maybe late 30s, wearing a plain windbreaker and carrying a clipboard. His face was sharp, his eyes sunken, and his expression unreadable. He looked official though. He had the same name tag lanyard as the teachers, and he spoke with this calm, authoritative tone. "All right, Group 3, with me," he said, scanning down his clipboard. I assumed he was another teacher I just didn't recognize. My school wasn't huge, but there were enough staff members that it wasn't impossible to overlook one. Still, I found it strange that none of my classmates seemed to know him either. As we walked through the echoing halls of the museum, the man kept a close eye on us. Too close. His gaze lingered on each of us just a little longer than it should have. Whenever someone strayed more than a few feet away, his voice would cut through the silence. "Stay with the group." His tone wasn't angry, was almost too calm, like he was rehearsing each word. At one point, I made eye contact with him. His lips curved into the faintest smile, but his eyes didn't change. They were completely cold, almost empty. It sent a shiver through me. Halfway through the tour, he began calling us by name, not reading them off a list, just speaking them out loud, as if he already knew. "Emily, move up closer so you can see. David, you're falling behind. Jason, don't lean on the railing." It stopped us in our tracks. We glanced at each other, whispering, because none of us remembered introducing ourselves to him. Our teacher eventually caught up with us and asked why we'd stopped. When someone mentioned the chaperone, the teacher just frowned. "What chaperone?" she asked. We turned. He was standing right there, clipboard in hand, silent. The teacher looked straight past him, as if he wasn't even there. That's when the air seemed to thicken. I remember my chest tightening, like the atmosphere had changed. I wanted to say something, but for some reason the words caught in my throat. The man's faint smile returned, and he tapped his pen against the clipboard. Tap, 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 tap. The rest of the day dragged on in a haze of unease. He stayed with our group until the end, never leaving our side. Sometimes he would hum quietly to himself, a slow, tuneless sound that made the silence feel unbearable. When we boarded the bus to go home, I expected him to follow us. But when I glanced back at the museum steps, he was gone. Just gone. No goodbye, no sign of him walking away like he had never been there at all. I tried convincing myself I had imagined it, that maybe he was just another museum employee filling in. But when we got back to school, our teacher did the final head count and marked each chaperone present, except there were only 4 adults listed, no 5th. I asked her quietly who the tall man with the clipboard was. Her face went pale. "What man?" she asked. I described him, every detail I could remember. She shook her head firmly. "There was no one else with us, and we don't bring additional staff without notice." That night, I couldn't shake the memory of his eyes. The way he had said my name, like he'd known me before I even arrived. A week later, I overheard one of the teachers in the lounge whispering to another. I only caught fragments. Something about the same description, last year's trip, and don't scare the kids. To this day, no one has ever acknowledged it directly. No one admits that a man who didn't belong was guiding us through that museum, okay? Watching us too closely, calling us by names we never gave him. But sometimes, when I walk into crowded places, malls, train stations, even other museums, I feel it again. That same weight in the air, that same tapping sound. Once, I could have sworn I saw him, standing in the corner of a crowded atrium, clipboard in hand, just waiting for me to notice. She never got off the bus with us. I saw her sitting in the very back, staring out the window as the rest of us filed into the museum. But when I turned around to point her out to my friend, the seat was empty. It was in 8th grade, on a spring field trip to a history museum about an hour away from our school. I remember being more excited about the bus ride than the museum itself, because it meant time away from teachers and the usual routine. The bus smelled faintly of vinyl seats and old gum, and sunlight streaked in through the dusty windows. I sat near the middle, saving a spot for my best friend, when I noticed a girl slide into the very back row. She looked familiar, but not enough that I could place her. It's dark hair, pale skin, wearing a plain hoodie with the hood halfway up. I didn't think much of it at first. It's PH. I just assumed she was in another homeroom. Our school was small, but it wasn't impossible to overlook someone. Still, something about her caught my attention. She didn't talk to anyone, didn't scroll on her phone like most of us. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, staring at the window like she wasn't really there. The ride was uneventful. The driver cracked bad jokes through the intercom. Kids swapped snacks, and a couple in the back threw gum wrappers at each other. At one point, I glanced back and noticed the girl was still staring outside, completely motionless. No laughter, no chatter, no signs of boredom or excitement, just this eerie stillness. When we finally pulled up to the museum, everyone started piling off. Teachers were calling out, herding us into lines. I grabbed my backpack and joined the shuffle. Out of curiosity, I looked back to see if the quiet girl was following. She was still in her seat, pressed up against the glass, her eyes fixed on something far away. I froze for a second. "Hey," I nudged my friend. "That girl's still back there." But when I turned again to point, the seat was empty. The back row was completely vacant, as if no one had been sitting there at all. I brushed it off, convincing myself she must have slipped past me in the crowd. Still, it bothered me the whole time we toured the museum. Hours later, when we regrouped at the bus for the ride home, I couldn't help but check. Sure enough, when I climbed aboard, she was there sitting in the exact same spot, same posture, same expression, like she'd never moved. I glanced around at my classmates, waiting for someone else to acknowledge it, but no one did. Everyone else was laughing, swapping souvenirs, arguing about who had the better seat. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was from another bus. Maybe she had a pass to ride with us. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. No one interacted with her, not once. Kids brushed by her to get to their seats and didn't even glance her way. It was like I was the only one who saw her. The ride back felt longer. Every time I risked a glance, she was still staring at the window. My chest tightened, and I forced myself to look forward for the rest of the trip. When we pulled into the school lot, everyone unloaded quickly. Teachers shouted reminders about bringing permission slips back tomorrow. Kids were already texting parents. I turned one last time. She was still there, not moving, not getting up. I didn't say anything. Just hurried off the bus, telling myself I was imagining things. That night, I couldn't sleep. The image of her blank face in the reflection of the bus window kept flashing in my mind. I finally told myself I'd bring it up to someone in the morning, just to prove I wasn't crazy. The next day at school, I asked around, casually, describing her to a few classmates. No one knew who I was talking about. Even my friend, who had been sitting right beside me, swore up and down that there hadn't been anyone in the back seat. At lunch, curiosity got the better of me, and I mentioned it to our teacher. Her face went pale almost immediately. She asked me to describe the girl again. When I finished, she gave this forced smile and told me, it must have been overtired, but the way she quickly changed the subject made my skin crawl. Later, I overheard her whispering to another teacher about something that happened a few years back. I couldn't catch everything, but I heard enough. A student had gone missing on a field trip, last seen on the bus. The story died down in whispers, and no one ever confirmed it directly. I stopped asking questions after a while, but I can't unsee her face pressed against that window, the way she never left her seat. And more often than not, I swear I see her just for a split second sitting there, staring out, waiting for someone else to notice. Because I think that's what she wants, someone to notice, someone to stay with her. And every time, I wonder, if I had stayed on the bus just a little longer that day, would I have ever gotten off? He went missing for only 20 minutes, but when he came back, everyone swore he wasn't the same person who left. This happened during my sophomore year of high school, on a geology field trip to a series of limestone caverns a couple hours outside town. I wasn't thrilled to be there dark. Damp caves weren't exactly my idea of fun, but it meant a day off normal classes, so I went along. The caves smelled of wet stone and mildew, the kind of air that sticks in your throat. We wore helmets with little lights attached, and the guide's voice echoed weirdly against the jagged walls. At first, everything was fine. My group trailed behind the teacher, cracking jokes and pretending to be interested in the rock formations. That's when I noticed Adam. He wasn't my friend exactly, but he was in my class, the kind of kid who blended into the background. He seemed restless, hanging back a little. When the group paused to hear the guide explain some mineral deposits, Adam slipped away down a narrow side tunnel. I thought he just needed to get away from the crowd. 10 minutes passed, then 15. Our teacher started looking around nervously, calling his name. The cave seemed to swallow her voice whole. When we finally heard footsteps echoing back toward us, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Adam reappeared from the darkness, his helmet light tilted oddly on his head. At first, everyone laughed and teased him for wandering off, but then the laughter stopped. Something about him was off. He was pale, almost gray, and his eyes didn't quite focus when he looked at us. His lips were pressed together in this strange, tight way, like he was forcing himself not to smile. When the teacher scolded him, he just nodded, but it was too slow, too deliberate. Like he was mimicking how a person should respond. The rest of the tour felt wrong. Adam didn't say a single word. He walked behind us, his helmet light shining just slightly too low, as though he wasn't watching the path, but something on the ground. At one point, I swear I felt his eyes burning into the back of my neck, and when I glanced at him, he quickly turned away. By the time we reached the exit, I was relieved to see daylight again. Everyone piled back onto the bus, chattering about souvenirs and photos, but Adam sat silently in his seat, staring at the window, not staring out of it, staring at the reflection. That night, I couldn't shake it. I replayed his expression over and over in my head. It wasn't just that he looked different, it was like he was holding something in. The next day at school, things only got worse. Adam didn't talk to anyone. He didn't eat lunch. He just sat there, stiff and quiet, until the final bell. A couple of kids joked about him being possessed, but even they looked uneasy when he finally turned and gave them a smile. It wasn't a normal smile. His teeth clenched together, lips stretched too wide, and his eyes stayed dead and flat. I started avoiding him, a tease, but even then, I couldn't escape. One morning I walked into homeroom early and found him already sitting there, even though the building had just opened. He was hunched over his desk, sketching something. When I got closer, I realized he was drawing the same image over and over again. A dark, jagged tunnel, with a tiny figure standing at the end. I backed out of the room and didn't say a word. A week later, Adam stopped coming to school. Rumors spread quickly that he was sick, that his parents pulled him out, that he'd been sent to another district. No one knew for sure. Here's the part that still keeps me awake. On the last day I saw him, as the final bell rang, he brushed past me on his way out of the classroom. For the first time since the caves, he spoke. He leaned just close enough for me to hear and whispered, "It's still waiting for me." Then he walked away. I've never seen him again. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night, I'll catch a glimpse of someone walking along the side of the road, head tilted, moving just a little too slow, a little too deliberately. I never look long enough to be sure, because deep down, I'm terrified that if I do, I'll see Adam's face, and I'll know he finally let whatever was waiting for him in that tunnel follow him back.